started testing it in the 2004 timeframe. Dropped on a couple of movers. I think we started off like at 15 or 25 miles an hour, and then finally moved up to a 40-mile-an-hour test. And the fastest target ever killed in combat was at 106 miles an hour.
All players, slow down, active, bullseye, 1327, post active. Lights on.
Welcome to the show where we make sense of defense in an enjoyable way. Quick motherhood. If you found the show, don't lose us. Like, follow, and turn on the notifications and add it to your playlist. And also check out the newsletter, and the link is in the show notes. It's packed full of insights and tech happenings. It's written by insiders like me, but you can get the reading for free. So check it out. Do your thing. All right. And that's the end of the motherhood. Today, we're in for a treat. One of my favorite types of shows that we do is the ones where I get to chat about defense technology, some history, and a little bit of storytelling. And if that's not enough, the icing on the cake today is I know this guest. And today's guest I actually know pretty well. We've known each other for about 15 years, but more importantly, almost every warfighter that in the world who's ever employed a JDAM, a Joint Direct Attack Munition. That's a GPS-aided bomb. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. They all know him too, either directly or indirectly. His name is Steve Wingfield, and he has been associated with the creation, deployment, and employment of the world's first operational GPS-aided bomb for about the past 35 years. He started in uniform, he transitioned to the civilian sector, recently retired. Congratulations. Wingie, welcome to the show. How was that as an intro? Is that good?
Thanks, Paco. That's great.
So tell us about yourself. It's not a trick question.
I got commissioned in 76, too young for Vietnam, out of ROTC scholarship type of thing. But I had to wait 8 months to come active duty, went to nav school out at Mather Air Force Base, got one of 3 fighters out of that class, fighter lead-in, FTU down at Homestead Air Force Base, first assignment Moody, where my first job was working in the weapons shop and pretty much never left it throughout my entire Air Force and Boeing career. Out of there, I got tagged for a remote to Kunsan, fell into weapons there, came back to Moody. They wanted to send me FTU. I talked them out of it. Was on the first Gunsmoke team back in the day when Gunsmoke was real. If you remember that, that was the competitions they used to have. And then went to weapons school, F4 weapons school. Went back to Moody for a short time. And then I got a request for assignment to Eglin Air Force Base for developmental weapons testing. Got real involved in a lot of smart weapons. Did pretty much all the AGM-130 pre-shots, which was called a GB-15 short-chord wing. Then the AGM-130 shots. Went over to Israel, flew the Popeye, which is the AGM-142 that the B-52s used. So we got all that done. Dropped a bunch of GB-24s when they were brand new. I was loving life flying both in F-4s and F-15s, or F-15s. I didn't have E models yet down there. But then I got a by name to Langley, still TAC at that time, in the Weapons Requirements Division, working for Joe Ralston. And I was told to write a SWORD, System Operational Requirements document, for AG-130. So they wanted me to back that in after I'd already flight tested the thing. Didn't want to go to the staff. So when a remote came up to Turkey, I thought, I can escape the staff in 2 years, then go fly after that. I wrote the plan to get all the airplanes in for display determination, which was the big NATO exercise, and they used it for bringing everybody into Turkey to fight the storm. So, but right after that, because the return to fly boards had been canceled because of the war, I wasn't going to extend remote. So they said, find a job. I called my old boss. I went right back to Langley in weapons requirements. And that's how the memo landed on my desk, because the boss said, hey, you don't have anything to do. And the new task just came in, and we know you can do this because I just written in my previous tour at Langley the AGM-130 sword. So they said, do it again. So essentially, the adverse weather precision guided munition started with that memo and started writing the operational requirements document and working on the COIA, which was a cost and operational effectiveness analysis, and about 4 guys worth of work with one guy. So we made it happen.
You just rattled off a crap ton of acronyms. None of those, by the way, are JDAM. So tell me how JDAM actually became JDAM.
The way that happened was at the time, the Navy was also working on a standoff weapon system, which essentially became JSAL once the Air Force signed up to buy some of them. And oh, by the way, Navy, you're going to have to buy some of our JDAMs. So when both those programs went joint, we changed the name to Joint Direct Attack Munition, which was JDAM was way better than OPIGM.
Wasn't there a name between those two?
When they first started joint up, the boss wanted to name it Joint Direct Attack Program, and I didn't like JDAP because that sounded like ceiling caulk. So I said, how about JDAM? And at the time, we were thinking it was going to be JDAM, but the boss went along with it. So that's how we ran from there. Justifying the program, getting it through all its milestones, and like you and I talked earlier. One, we didn't have any GPS on any aircraft, tactical aircraft at the time. We had to get with some really smart guys, and one of those key guys was Doc Lou Serrato down at Eglin, because we had to figure out what kind of accuracy was the art of the possible. So between what we thought a weapon could do, and then along with the inputs and capabilities of the aircraft, we had to root some square a whole bunch of data to come up with the original 13-meter accuracy requirement. 13 meters is 50 feet. And back in the day, we used to win quarters on the range with 50-foot bombs. So we said, hey, that's good enough. But the beauty was that because there's so much slop in all those requirements, that the system, when we finally started testing, was a lot better than a 13-meter bomb. So much so that in 2006, Boeing voluntarily changed the requirements to a 6-meter bomb accuracy, and it was still much better than that because slimy contractors always like to have margin. So our 6-meter bomb was more like a 1 and 2 and 3-meter bomb, depending on how good the GPS solution was and your targeting.
Yeah, I've dropped hundreds and hundreds of them, and they drive nails. They drive nails. So maybe we'll tell some stories about that. So what year was this? Because you retired in 98. The McPeak memo was in 91.
91 to 94, I got the requirement written. It justified. We actually did while we were working on that, we started an accuracy analysis to say, well, hey, if I put a seeker on this thing and got it even more accurate, would that be worth doing? Because kills per sortie were always the driver. And back in my F4 days, we'd drop a stick of 6 to hit one target. So the more targets you could kill per sortie was the golden rule that we wanted to make. So we did those analyses, which that accuracy analysis would come back later in time, and you and I'll probably talk about Laser JDAM, but
yeah.
But that essentially helped justify even more accuracy. And since we're talking about the ORD a little bit, the original ORD requirement was for a 40,000 units at $40,000 a piece.
Oh yeah,
And
we'll talk about We're going to talk about that in just a minute.
yeah, but you were talking about dropping hundreds.
Yeah.
I wanted to just throw in that over 200,000 JDAMs have been dropped in combat. So that just kind of shows how it earned its way into the fight.
Yeah, I was I was with you in St. Charles, but probably 10 years ago, doing the 300,000 off
Right.
the line, not dropped in combat, but the produced off the line. And that's,
Right.
I mean, it's got to be double,
So
easily double by now.
we're probably getting into the 600,000 deliveries here pretty quick. And I mean, we've got individual international customers that bought over 40,000. So there's a lot around the world on Western and now non-Western type aircraft.
We'll get to that, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the show, I'm sure. But let's, man, I got so many ways to go with this. Let's back up just a minute. The McPeak memo, the reason he wrote it, it was really based on the weather, because the weather actually drew out, as short as the campaign was, drew out Desert Storm, ironically because of storms. So there was no all-weather capability, right? The weather was bad, you stopped fighting, and you waited for the weather to pass. That was really the impetus of the after action, right?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. It's we couldn't drop LGBs, we couldn't strike the land targets. The air-to-air fight was still going on, but yeah, that was the bottom line. Was I need something that'll work when the weather's bad.
Before JDAM and that program, there was a program before it. So the alibi was the JDAM is the world's first operational GPS aided munition, but it wasn't the first, even in the U.S. And so there was a little tiny program called GAM that lasted for a little bit of time as a little bit of a stopgap, but a proof of concept, right?
Exactly, and it was at the time it was not just it was almost a little bit of a strategic stopgap as well, in that it was a B2 weapon, and it used multiple SAR maps from the B2 to essentially provide the targeting, and then the GPS solution provided the ability to get to that target. There were, a couple of different warhead sizes, the 2,000 pounder and the 5,000 pounder, but essentially the 5,000 pounder was more of a modified GBU-27 type of thing.
So GAM was the GPS aided munition, GAM. GBU-36 was the 2K. GBU-37 was the 5,000 pounder. That actually set the conditions. At the time, no one really knew it, but it set the conditions because it was integrated on the B2 by 95, 96 timeframe. It actually set the conditions for the JDAM's combat debut. That, again, complete coincidental that all those things kind of fell into place at the time, right?
Right, exactly. And the point was that there weren't that many of them, and essentially during Allied force, the Bosnian War, and all that kind of stuff, they had good coordinates, or in some cases, they thought they had good coordinates.
Yeah,
but
one anomaly.
Yeah, yeah. But the bottom line was that essentially used the B2 to drop some of the initial GB31s, and they worked well. They hit the targets, which was extremely interesting. I mean, my background was both AGM-130 and JDAM, and the Danube Bridge. They hit that bridge with 5 AGM-130s, and essentially just put burn marks on the pilings. And then the B2s came through and dropped 5, same warhead, simultaneously impacting on the bridge center span and both ends, and dropped the whole span into the river. So it was pretty interesting.
I've got the metrics here. 652 GBU-31s were dropped by the B2 in Kosovo. So that's Operation Allied Force and the whatever 2 or 3 operations that kind of rolled up to that.
Right.
98% hit rate on the targets. Like, that is game changing. And even LGBs, number one, you couldn't get that mass because it's 1 bomb per pass. But even then, you're not getting a 98% hit rate.
No, in its best time, GBUs were 70 to 80% were reliable. So things would just not work sometimes. As you and I both know.
Oh yeah, I've seen it happen. Okay, let's back up. Again, we're kind of going back and forth in history, but it's really nuanced and it's important, right? It's part of the story. So when the JDAM program started, and I was doing some research about this, and I remember the academics and everything. The 40,000 for 40,000, that 40,000 was a price cap. It was one of the first programs that went through this. It was basically a test program that went through this acquisition reform with Congress.
Yeah.
And part of it is they got to waive a lot of the stuff that would normally encumber a program that would kind of bloat time, schedule, and cost. And they basically said, strip out all the crap. Here's the price cap. Here's the quantities. Make it happen. And there was kind of a competition off of the efficiency of getting to that combat capability, not just the capability itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was called acquisition streamlining. But if you really look back to how the government was supposed to acquire systems, the 5000 series documents all said, hey, it should take 7 years from concept to fielding, and nothing took 7 years because of the bureaucracy and the schedule padding and budget issues and all those kinds of things that always impact a program. So typically it'd take 12, 15, 20 years to get a product. So the whole idea of putting JDAM under the acquisition streamline was, just like you said, to cut the bureaucracy. And it still was bureaucratic, but the whole concept of a 7-year program that's what we achieved. I mean, like the first memo dropped in 91 and we had our first combat shots in 98. So the whole point was to say 7 years, I'm in combat in 7 years, and everybody's pretty proud of that. So proud of it they didn't continue doing that with every other weapon system out there. So.
Yeah, what became the standard became the anomaly very quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
McDonnell Douglas won it in 94, if I remember right. But
yeah.
maybe you could let's shed some light, because you went to work at McDonnell Douglas, 98 timeframe when you retired. They won by just like way overdoing it, and by that I mean like way undercutting the price. So they won on like a supply chain efficiency rampage. And I read somewhere that they had won the program with a price point that was half of the dollar limit, like something in the $20,000 range.
Not sure what's cleared, but yeah, it was under 20K per unit, and they beat the competition by several $1,000s per unit. It had been down selected to Lockheed and to McDonnell Douglas, but about the time we started into production, Boeing and McDonnell Douglas had merged. So about that very same time.
Okay, so we have so here we are. We have JDAM in the field. Kosovo happens. 98% hit rate. Everyone is like, this program is amazing. This combat capability is amazing. And like from the next probably 8 years, it opened the floodgates of different sizes of JDAM and then different aircraft that they were going to be integrated on. I intersected JDAM and the Strike Eagle in 2007, 2008 timeframe. When I was going through our B course in a formal training, we still had aircraft that weren't yet modified to even have JDAM. I'll never forget, because I was just a dumb student, and we have these RTT things you have to do on the back and forth from some of the working areas, and we had the attack card was a JDAM attack card. And I was like, okay, do this, put this on this screen, and you go through all the academics. And I remember not really like thinking about it, because no one ever told us. And I go to bring up the screens in the jet. And I'm like, there's no button. I don't know where the screen is. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And I want to ask my instructor. He's in the front seat. I'm like, oh shit.
You're not that jet, buddy.
Yeah, it is. I was like, he's like, how's that looking? I think he knew the whole time. He's like, hey, how's that JDAM RTT looking? I was like, I'm having some problems. And he's like, yeah, this jet isn't modified for JDAM. You can't do that attack. I was like, oh, killing me. So,
what's really funny, in those very same jets down at Seymour, like a week before I retired, I was in the ORI. We were doing AG-130s with GPS on the AG-130s. And the weapon had GPS, the airplane did not. So the beauty of that is that I could plug a target in, and I was getting steering through AG-130 in the back seat. And the IGs, they had no clue. So when I was saying, hey, we need to come 3 degrees left, and they think I'm just a genius on the map when I've got a freaking AGM-130 pointing to the target for us.
Just sitting on the wing with a GPS receiver, and you're just looking at the display. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So it was pretty good.
So my understanding is it went from the B-2 and then go to the bombers, and so the bombers got it, and then it kind of went into the fighters after that, right?
Yeah, it jumped in the F-16 pretty quick. Pretty much the limfac was getting GPS on the airplanes. And like you mentioned, the Strike Eagle crowd were, some aircraft were getting them sooner than others. And essentially, I think they were looking a little bit at the deployment schedules to try to figure out, hey, these guys are going to deploy in 6 months. We need to mod their jets, blah, blah, blah. So, and then all the new builds were coming out with GPS at that time too. So it just took a while, but over time, we were on pretty much every U.S. Air Force, Navy, and Marine aircraft, by 2010 timeframe. This I was giving a briefing a bunch to every weapons school out there. So
you could tell the integration by your travel schedule, because you used to go to every weapons school class, and then you would used to. I remember the story. Like, your travel schedule used to be insane. And for listeners, like, just the appreciation. We have this guy who works at Boeing, Wingie. Every squadron before they deployed with JDAM would go to the squadron, give them academics like from the actual manufacturer, not just the operator or weapons school academics. And he was the guy who helped write the weapons school academics for the instructors to then teach the students, Top Gun, etc. So just the appreciation of Wingie being a little bit of the right place, the right time, but really like found your passion, found your thing, and just kind of ran with it.
Yeah, like I always used to joke that, like, if they let fat old guys fly airplanes, I'd still be doing it. But I could at least talk the talk. I couldn't walk the walk anymore.
Me neither. I'm retired now, so yeah, I know the feeling. You start aging out of like, I think that's how it happened. I think that's where the button was. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We talked about the success of Kosovo and all the stuff that happened in the 7 years to get to Kosovo. And it's funny when you actually think about it. From the end of Kosovo to the beginning of 9/11 was like 18 months. So like, it's such a blip now. It got overshadowed very quickly by 9/11. And most people don't really realize that 10-year time period between Desert Storm and 9/11, there was a lot of stuff happening that really set the conditions for this entire program, and really how we employ weapons on targets today. And it was all this like 10-year period that really just kind of got lost to history in some ways, which is why I wanted to have this conversation with you.
Well, the other thing that was funny was that in Kosovo, that little bit of success that we had put more burden on the contractor, because all of a sudden, instead of building, 1,000 a year, you're going to be building 10,000 a year, and none of your suppliers are ready for that. So nobody can build those types of things. So as we enjoyed more and more success, we had to strive harder and harder to essentially get all those ducks in a row to build more weapons. I mean, we had 1 year, I want to say like 2006, 2007, where we built 45,000 JDAMs 1 year.
Jesus.
And then we did that for like 2 years. And then all of a sudden, kind of peace was breaking out. And then we dropped down to 5,000 a year. Well, that's not a very good thing to do with your suppliers, because they're going from busting their butts to, ooh, now I got to lay a bunch of people off.
Yeah.
So that's always been one of the big issues on defense acquisition, is that we got these long-term plans, but we don't have long-term funding. So you can't, there's nothing reliable about it.
Multi-year procurement was the one thing. There's a lot of advocates, because weapons is always the bill payer every year. It's like, hey, let's just buy less weapons and put that money over here, not realizing there's, second, third order effects. And we'll jump forward and back for a second, but in 2014, 2015, I was doing the Inherent Resolve Syria kind of stuff, and the amount of weapons that we were just going through. And I think everyone's like, oh my God, we're going to drop this weapon today, and it'll take 4 years to put it back on the shelf, because we basically cut off the pipes for production because we didn't need them. And so it's not something you can just, start, stop. You have to keep a steady state so it's predictable for supply. About every 10 years, it's the same lesson that the Pentagon tends to relearn.
Nobody learns it.
Every 10 years it happens again. You're like, man, this sounds familiar.
We had a handshake promise from the government that we would never go below 10,000. And 3 years later, we were at 3,500 a year,
Oh,
as
man.
opposed to 3,500 a month. But yeah, those issues happened. But I know what you're talking about in 2014 was more laser JDAMs.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Went through the same thing where, anyway, when we get to that, we
Yeah.
can talk to that one though. But
Yeah. So 9/11 happens. And again, we're just out of the end of Kosovo. Everyone's like, this is the best thing ever. I want more. And it's going to take time to scale up production. And 9/11 kicks off. And the stats are like, just to put the conditions, and we haven't even talked about OIF yet. So 9/11 happens. And the end of 2001, the stat that I saw was that the U.S. had employed almost 5,000 JDAMs in Afghanistan in that September to December timeframe, and that was half of all JDAMs that had currently existed in the world. And so they're like, "Oh crap, we need more JDAMs." And so it set all of these suppliers in parallel paths for co-production. I think there's A and B suppliers for certain parts, and all of that's going to come back to mean something when Iraq kicks off again. But at the time, no one really knew Iraq was going to happen, and this is like 2001.
exactly. But we started to build up our production rates, and like you mentioned, OIF kicks off, and all of a sudden that became a very steep slope that we had to build to.
And I remember the story, and I'm going to forget the details, but I'll tee it up for you to fill in the blanks as you dust off the cobwebs. There was an issue where there was one of the suppliers could not meet the demand capacity for the IMUs.
Right.
So
Honeywell,
they had to go.
yeah.
It was Honeywell. So they we literally cannot build this many IMUs. And Boeing was like, I don't care. We have this many kits we have to deliver. So they found another supplier. And
not exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
There was not a second supplier. What happened is that the ring laser gyro that drives the whole capability, they could only build those at such a rate, and then only about 20 to 30% of everything they built met the requirement. So when we started to ramp up initially, and the whole point is this ramp up is going, the government actually paid for a whole nother factory line for Honeywell because we needed so many more. And if the sweet spot was 20 or 30% of these guys, we needed more population to pull from. Where you're going at is the B grade IMUs.
That's what it was.
Were the not the top 20% that I got that met my requirement. Was the B grades were maybe that 30 to 50% of the pot that were almost good enough, but not quite. Well, so until this new factory got built, we got permission to essentially use the B grade IMUs, because as long as you had GPS available, B grade IMUs would work just as well, because they drifted more, which gave you more inaccuracy if you were in a inertially guided venue. But if you had GPS augmentation, they were just as accurate as A grade. So we augmented our production with B grade IMUs until that second line came up.
I don't think that ever would have been a known story. It's one of those, hey, a supplier made it happen. Until OIF was the first war that had GPS jammers. And I remember seeing some of the imagery. They had put GPS jammers in different spots because they had seen like, hey, if we have this GPS guided bomb, if we put jamming out there, they won't be able to guide, which is not true unless you have a crappy IME that doesn't meet the spec and it's going to drift. So they would put GPS jammers on towers in random places to reduce the CEP, the uncertainty volume, or the accuracy of the weapon if it got jammed. The B grade IMU JDAMs dropped in the GPS jamming environments didn't do too well.
No. And what in certain parts of the world later in life, we found a bunch of those in places where you definitely didn't want them.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we tried to come up with plans to swap those out and do things like that. But to retrofit tail kits with the new IMU would cost more than if I just bought another tail kit. So
Yep. So just like Desert Storm created a pain point from weather, which then drove the JDAM program. But one of the things we hadn't really talked about yet certainly manifested itself in OIF when it kicked off in 2004 timeframe was if I take off and I'm going to fly for 10 hours or 12 hours and the target moves or I get retasked to a dynamic target, how do I reprogram the weapon? And this, interestingly enough, set the conditions for what became Laser JDAM, which then unlocked yet a different capability that, again, no one had really anticipated, which was the ability to hit moving targets, right?
I referenced that accuracy analysis earlier.
Yeah.
But some of us old heads had thought about, hey, I've got to hit moving targets too. And that's where that analysis for me had piqued my interest in more capability than we ever had before. So that when this relocatable moving target dilemma came up, I went with a couple other guys and we built the business case at Boeing for essentially Laser JDAM. And essentially Boeing said, hey, you're right. This is something we need. The government needs. So while they don't have their act together yet to tell us to do it, we did it on our own for about $30 million and essentially started testing it in the 2004 timeframe. Dropped on a couple of movers. I think we started off like at 15 or 25 miles an hour and then finally moved up to a 40-mile-an-hour test. And it was so successful that I actually had an old buddy. We'd flown F-4s together, who was the commander at 9th Air Force. I was absent at the time. And I said, hey, you guys really need this capability. He said, you're right, Wingie. Get with this team on in the 609th and write a U on. So we did that. And at the same time, I was talking to the Navy, and the Navy wrote a U on for a relocatable and moving targets called DAM-TIC, Direct Attack Moving Target Capability. And since they built a program, and the Navy ended up getting that contract, and the Air Force bought through the DAM-TIC contract, bought their Laser JDAMs as well. The interesting thing, though, was that the Air Force said, we only need 400 of these because these are such niche targets. And the Navy's UON said, we only need 400 of these. So the initial requirement was for 800 total units. So we essentially get on contract, we start to build these things up, but at the same time, we're doing testing out at like the 422 out at Nellis and demonstrating on faster and faster targets. And pretty much we had self-written, actually had a big contribution to the ORD, the operational requirements document for Laser JDAM, which was 40 miles an hour. And we came up with that because the fastest thing in JMM at the time was towed artillery at 40 miles an hour. So we told all the engineers we had to have this capability. We got on contract, and then the Air Force decided, we really need 50 miles an hour. So we came up with the whole manual mode. If you remember, manual mode was just a way of letting the tail kit do the computation on a moving target until it could find the laser spot.
I lived when Laser JDAM came into the jet, and it was interesting because the weapon was getting integrated. It's JDAM, it's on the jet. They add the seeker and there's some other software, but it's not fully integrated into the jet yet. So there were some interesting things you had to do to trick. You put different settings and different screens in the jet to send a certain code to the weapon to trigger the logic for the different speeds, and it was a pain in the ass. I gotta admit, but when we needed to use it, it worked. It's way better now than when it first fielded. But if you see, and we'll put it in the YouTube channel. If you see a picture of a Strike Eagle from, call it 10, maybe 15 years ago, with a combat loadout in the Middle East, what you'll see is one side of the jet has 2 or 4 GBU-12s, and the other side of the jet typically has 3 GBU-38s, and then just sometimes a GBU-31 on the center line. And so that gives you 7 500-pound weapons, but they have different seeker kits and guidance kits. And so the JDAMs are awesome for, I want to drop more than one on a pass, so maybe I got to drop 2 that are spread out, or I know exactly where this target is, or there's bad weather. And then you would drop the GBU-12s, the laser guided bombs. You would save those if you had moving targets or something like that. And so when Laser JDAM came out, it really introduced the ability to like just put them on all the stations, and I have maximum flexibility for, you know, I can turn the seeker on, I can turn the seeker off, and you can do all kinds of things with fusing. And so cockpit programmable fusing was attached to the JDAM program, which the Air Force has loved and lived a long time. The Navy, not so much, because the way the fuse program worked. But being able to just cockpit selectable fuse, go to a different target, you know, in dynamic targeting. So, hey, Chariot directs, go over here, see this target, and the ability to hit movers. You put all that together, and that was just, I lived like how all of those things came into the jet, and being able to use it in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. And man, what a great time to be alive.
Yeah, yeah, it was nice to be able to have a weapon that could do everything you needed with, and especially when, hey, if the bad guys are jamming, you didn't care. So
Yeah, yeah. And the other part with the movers, with the laser guided bomb, you had to lead the target. So Jedi Knight was the project to figure out how much do you lead it by, and it comes down to a little bit of like Kentucky windage, which is kind of weird when you're talking about a precision weapon. When Laser JDAM, the logic of that is like just put the thing on the thing, and the weapon will figure it all out. And so it took the guesswork out of it. So, you know, I like to say that JDAM basically turned everyone bombing for quarters now like hits the target. So it's really not even bombing for quarters anymore. You know, when everyone's an expert, you can make everyone look good. Whereas like before, it really came down to the capabilities of the individual pilot and the Wizzo in some cases, and their experience of like, how do I aim the jet, push the button right on time. And so it really elevated the combat capability of the entire force, which is like, again, one of those interesting contributions to really defense tech that it's really rare when you think about it, or where one thing fundamentally changes the entire dynamic.
And the beauty is that and again, the capability was far exceeded the initial. Like I said, we came up with 40 miles an hour. Then the Air Force said 50, and then while we wrote the software for the manual mode for 50 miles an hour, then they said, "Nah, let's make it 70." So that's why the manual mode, if you remember, had 2 different.
Oh yeah,
had a 40-mile-an-hour setting, a 60-mile-an-hour setting. But the whole point is that, like you mentioned, when the aircraft got fully integrated, then it was just like track it, and it's passing the moving target speed, and heading to the weapon. The weapon comes off and is heading to the intercept point from the get-go. So the fastest target ever killed in combat was at 106 miles an hour. So
I know, and we'll put the video. It's one of those rare occasions where number one, we can actually tell the story, and we have the video from the jet that dropped it.
Yeah, the funny story on that one was the guys called me the day it happened, and said, "Oh, Wingie, you need to see this Laser JDAM, you know." And I'm going, "This is great." And I said, "Well, how can I see the video?" And they said, "Well, you'll probably need to get in a skiff someplace."
Yeah.
Except I got in a skiff, and we, a week later, finally saw it. And then the guys, "Oh shoot, that was on YouTube the next day. What are you talking about?" And I'm going,
I remember they landed, I could see it, and they goes, "You got to see this." And I'm like, "Holy shit, that's crazy!" And it has a speed indicator, so you can see how fast the vehicle's actually going because it's calculating it and showing it in the jet. That's and it's like a perfectly straight highway. All these situations that would never really align, and it's at night, it makes it even better.
and there were 2 of them. There were 2. They were vehicle-borne IEDs, and they only got permission to drop on one when they should have dropped on. I hit the other guy too. I go, "What idiot would drive through burning wreckage if he wasn't also a bad guy?" So
And it happens so fast. So imagine if you're the second guy and you see the first guy, did it just blow itself up? Like what happened? Because you can't see the bomb. I mean, you hear a swoosh like in the last like millisecond as it's coming in from the air pressure. It's going 1,000 feet per second, something like that. That's a great story. Again, way over engineered, and kind of the history of that thing. It's always under promised, over delivered. Where are we at now with JDAM? So as we're recording this, MOP, the tail kit for MOP is built in the same place that the JDAM tail kits are built.
Yep.
And I know everyone saw Midnight Hammer, the GBU 57s from the MOPs. I know you can't share too much about that, but those two do have a lineage together, or they're in the family tree, right?
Well, yeah, you're 100% right. In MOP, there's a whole lot of essentially JDAM components in MOP, but then also because of what it was designed for, some additional capabilities like better anti-jam, better INS. Again, because if the jamming is that intense, it's an aircraft grade IMU in it. And then it was a give and take in that, hey, JDAM essentially was the original pieces parts that went into MOP, and then MOP improved, and then JDAM benefited from that later on. We had a UON written urgent operational need, for higher anti-jam capability, which we pulled from MOP and threw into JDAM. That was whole Saber Y capability. So, so the whole point there is that you kind of give and take from the same programs, given that there's different capabilities required, but as you move into different theaters, you need those capabilities too. So the beauty of like Saber Y was now pretty much every Air Force weapons built with Saber Y cap now, because we have a large inventory of IGAS and other IGAS's integrated GPS anti-jam system. But I have all these different capabilities already in the bank, if you will. As the threat evolves, we have to evolve as well. Same with JDAM-ER, which was, we needed extender range, so we put wing kits on them. And so I don't know if you want to talk about the Ukrainian effort, but we went in there.
Let's talk
too.
about that. Yeah.
In 22, got a call from some guys who were working with some guys about putting a JDAM-ER capability on a non-Western jet. Through a little cloak and dagger type stuff, we helped build some unique capabilities to give an F4 qualified type of avionics system the top of the line JDAM capabilities. So I don't know what's authorized. I know what I see on YouTube all the time.
Yeah.
But don't want to give up too much stuff. But the whole point is that those weapons have evolved from, hey, let's get rid of some of the old JDAM tail kits out of the inventory with these ERs. Well, now they're going up against the worst jamming that we've seen in a long time, to where they've used some Saber Ys as well. So again, you evolve the fight such that you evolve the weapon to match the requirements of the fight. So a lot of art of the possible in there, and then all the new airplanes that are coming down the pike essentially now use JDAM as the baseline interface, and then even new weapons are using that same interface, because integration on the jet is usually the toughest nut to crack.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the program was modular from the beginning, it uses all existing warhead inventory, and so you have your 500 pound, 2,000 pound, 1,000 pound, 5,000 pound now, and then you have SDB, which we won't talk about today, and the smaller ones. I've got a tail kit to give me the guidance, and then I put a laser seeker on the nose to give me the moving targets. I bolt the wing kit on so it can glide and go further, and then probably the last thing we'll talk about, because I think it's one of the one everyone forgets about. If I take the tail kit and the glided wing kit, and we won't talk about any powered things today, but what if I change the warhead, and instead of a warhead to strike targets, maybe if I change it to a mine, and now we have these standoff precision glide mines for putting minefields in the ocean.
GB-64, right.
Yeah.
Well, that was a GON, a Joint Emerging Operational Need, to take the Mark 62 Quick Strike Mine, which is a 2,000 pounder, looks just like a Mark 84, and we put the wing kit and the tail kit with the ability to precisely put mines from standoff in the water exactly where you need them. B-52 was one of the primary platforms for doing that. They would have to deliver maybe 30% extra mines to make sure they had the mines in the right place, the right field density, those types of things. with the GB64, we could do that very same thing from standoff with placing the mines very precisely. And those now, if they're not IOC, they're supposed to be IOC by now, but I've been gone for 6 months, so I don't know what the latest status is.
Quick plug for the experimentation and exercises. Valiant Shield is an exercise happens in the Pacific, and Indo-PACOM sponsors it. I think it's the J81 office. And if it wasn't for that kind of resources and the opportunity space to bring things that aren't really fielded yet and trial and experiment and see where there's value, make those adjustments. I mean, I remember seeing a quick strike ER drop from a B-52 probably 10 years ago at Valiant Shield.
2014.
Yeah, 2014.
I was there. 2016, we dropped GB62s off of Hornets. 2018, we dropped the GB64s off the B-52s at Valiant Shield. And then 6 months later, dropped 4 more. We dropped 3 then that time, and then 4 more at PMRF. And essentially, hey, these things work, so let's do it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Spent a lot of time at Guam.
Yeah. Well, Wingie, you're enjoying retirement now, 6 months in. You'll probably get stir crazy 6 more months from now, but enjoy the time. And thank you from the bottom of our heart. Thank you for taking the time to share your story. And really, most importantly, thanks for everything you've done for the warfighter. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate Paco. Anytime, brother. You let me know if I can ever help.
Awesome. And for the audience, quick motherhood before we fence out. You found the show. Don't lose it. Like, follow, and turn on the notifications. Add it to your playlist if you're listening to this on a podcast. And finally, check out our newsletter using the links in the show notes. It's packed full of defense tech and industry news. It's written by insiders, and you can get the read-in for free. So check it out. Go to the link, enter your email, click, boom, you're set. That's it. That's the show. We're out.